Tonight on Primetime Politics, resisting the peace plan.
I'm ready to meet with President Trump, and there are sensitive points to discuss.
Canada and Ukraine's European allies present a counter-proposal to Donald Trump's peace plan, throwing into doubt that fighting with Russia will end anytime soon. Coming up, we'll speak to former ambassador to Russia Jeremy Kinsman about the U.S. effort to end the war in Ukraine. Also,
we've seen more movement in the direction of weakening the guardrails of democracy.
U.S. Senator Chris Coons on the state of American democracy and its impact on Canada. Plus,
break down the walls of indifference and act.
The mass killings in Sudan that the world is ignoring. This is Primetime Politics. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio. Well, the search for a diplomatic end to the war in Ukraine continued today, with U.S. and Russian officials talking in Abu Dhabi and the Prime Minister taking part in a virtual meeting with Ukraine's European allies, the so-called Coalition of the Willing, mulling over the peace plan released by Donald Trump last week. Now, you may remember that plan reflected much of what Russia hopes to achieve in Ukraine. And today, the BBC says the coalition is putting its own counter-proposals on the table, which does not include any territorial recognition for Russia, raises the proposed size of the Ukrainian military post-war, and leaves open the possibility of NATO membership.
And I'm ready to meet with President Trump, and there are sensitive points to discuss. We have them still, and we think that the presence of European leaders could be helpful. And let's discuss some key issues today in a closed format. But we must also not lose sight of reality. Russia's war against us is not in the past. It's happening every single day. Every day Russia takes Ukrainian lives.
Now, the Ukrainian president is asking for a meeting with Donald Trump, hopefully before the end of this weekend. But as we came on air this evening, we did see a message from the U.S. president. He says he is willing to meet with both Zelensky and Putin, but only as discussions are in their final stages, which obviously at this point they are not. We continue to track the story. But to talk about all of this, we're now reaching out to Jeremy Kinsman. From 1992 to 1996, he served as Canada's ambassador to Russia. Mr. Kinsman, always good to see you. Thank you for the time this evening.
Well, thank you.
Listen, the White House press secretary did issue a statement today acknowledging that there are still details to be sorted out between the two sides. But Carolyn Levitt says those differences are not insurmountable. I'm wondering if you share that assessment, because there still are wide gulfs between what Russia and Ukraine wants when it comes to territory, NATO, and the future of Ukraine's military.
Yeah, well, I guess we shouldn't take our cue from Carolyn Levitt on issues like this. It clearly is very wide of the mark. This has been a most abnormal experience, Michael. It's a complete departure, not just from process, but in judgment, in substance, and in its effect on the United States allies, habitual allies, including, of course, Ukraine, as to just what the hell is going on in that country, how they could get something so important so very wrong.
So very wrong, as you say, and to remind people, it is talking about limiting Ukraine's ability to defend itself down the road. It stops it from having NATO ambitions if they were to accept what was presented by the U.S. president. And from Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, he said that any counterproposal would need to reflect the text and the spirit of the earlier agreement. So how much of a corner does that put Ukraine into?
Well, I don't think it puts Ukraine necessarily into the corner. What it does, it makes, I think, a ceasefire at this time pretty nigh impossible. The United States wants to get that ceasefire, just like in Gaza, as if getting the ceasefire is the whole deal, you know. The ceasefire is a ceasefire. It's to stop the killing. But a ceasefire interferes with Russia's original aims for the whole illegal criminal project of invading Ukraine. They want to control, they want to subjugate Ukraine. And they think right now their advantage in population and to some extent in geography is on their side. You know, since this war began 3.5 years ago, the Russians have only enlarged the territory they control by 1%. But at the same time, they've suffered probably about a million casualties and fatalities in the effort. I mean, it's absolutely appalling. And yet Putin is determined to go on. And he thinks that ultimately, because right now, in the critical northeast of Ukraine, in Donetsk province, the Russians are putting on an 8-to-1 superiority in personnel. And the Ukrainians just, frankly, can't keep up forever and ever. But they're not going to give up, and they're not going to surrender. And this preposterous 28-point document, which is a series of Russian talking points, basically is a demand for their surrender. And it cannot be. And for once, the allies of the United States, I think particularly of those who were at the G20 meeting this weekend in South Africa, issued a statement saying that it would not be. And it was the first time they've actually, in a way, though they coded this with a sort of semi-lavish gratitude or acknowledgement for what Donald Trump has managed to prompt in creating this process of talks, they deferred to him on that. They did state very clearly that this is an exercise in American leadership that will not, in substance, work. They were careful.
Will not in substance work. But, you know, I want to jump in here because we did hear from Zelensky over the weekend, and the Ukrainian president described this initial peace plan as a choice between losing Ukraine's dignity or losing Ukraine's closest ally, and by that he means the United States. Can Ukraine continue this fight with Russia without the United States?
Well, it's a very big question, and the reason why Ukraine on one hand and the Europeans, on the other hand, want to avoid, provoking Trump's ego with any confrontational language, precisely because the United States is the only possible instrument, I think, to be able to exercise leverage on Russia, which they really haven't done. And with respect to Europe, of course, they want to see that leverage exercised on behalf of Ukrainian sovereignty and freedom, but also they want to keep the United States into the game of European security, which they consider, and particularly those on the eastern northern side of Europe, they believe it is distinctly menaced by this aggressive behavior on the part of a very hostile Russia.
Well, and hostile Russia, as you say. So talk to us then about the wider danger for Europe and really for any other democracy around this globe. If Ukraine, under pressure from the United States, accepted, you know, essentially the surrender of territory and limitations on military and NATO, what precedent does that set? What danger does that set for the rest of the world?
It's absolutely critical, Michael. The most, after the horrid, catastrophic Second World War, they killed 65 million people. The victors, I guess, and even the defeated countries concluded that this could never happen again. And the basic norm that had to, at all costs, be preserved was the interdiction against a country invading and using force to conquer a neighbor. And that hasn't happened, really, certainly on the European continent since the war, until this. And if Ukraine is forced into subjugation with restrictions on its independence that were explicit in this 28-point plan, which is now thankfully discarded, it would totally destroy the credibility, the viability of that norm, and we'd be in a nowhere land now of the big eat the small, and it will be a retreat back to the worst part of the 19th century.
Which is why we are watching this also very closely. Jeremy Kinsman, this process not yet over, but for this point, at this point rather, thank you for the time. We'll reach out again in future.
You bet.
Not surprisingly, Ukraine figured very large this weekend at the Halifax International Security Forum, an annual gathering of government, military and civil leaders. This year's forum was very focused on protecting democracy. But how committed is the United States to preserving and fostering that democracy was a subject of discussion that came up very often this weekend. It's also something I addressed with U.S. Senator Chris Coons when we sat down for an interview in Halifax. Senator Coons, thank you for the time.
Thank you, Michael. Great to be on with you.
Now, you've been coming to the Halifax International Security Forum for years now, but you come to Halifax this year hearing from a lot of people from different countries, allies of the United States, expressing concern about the United States and its commitment to democracy right now. What's that like?
Well, I'll never forget being here in 2016 with Senator John McCain just after Trump was elected for the first time President of the United States. There was widespread alarm and concern that he might abandon NATO, that he might undermine the North Atlantic relationship. And we spent a very busy weekend reassuring all of our partners and allies. It is challenging at times to be here now, the second time that my nation has elected Trump president. And my general conversations have been about how deep and strong and important the relationships are between the United States and Canada, military to military, intelligence service to intelligence service, families and businesses. But I recognize that the chaotic decisions he's made around tariffs and the uneven relationship that he's led to between some of our core allies has made many question the reliability of the U.S. partnership. Part of why we have such a large and bipartisan delegation of 8 senators is all of us want to both thank and reassure our Canadian partners and allies.
Okay, you mentioned trade, and I do want to pick up on that point because it is, as you suggest, a major sticking point right now with this country at the very least, if not with many others. But there are Canadians on this side of the border wondering, where is the congressional pushback?
So to be specific, we have now twice passed legislation in the Senate, which requires Republicans to vote for it, invalidating the emergency on which Trump's IEEPA-based tariffs rely for statutory power. The House, however, has refused to take them up. So your question's a good one. Why are Republicans in the House and Senate not pushing back more forcefully, more effectively? I don't think there's a single Democrat who supports tariffs on Canada, particularly justified on some fictitious fentanyl crisis or threat to our national security. It is my hope that our Supreme Court will ultimately decide that the president does not have the power to put on and take off and put on and take off tariffs at whim, that our Constitution allocates that power to the Article I branch, Congress. But frankly, I think Trump is so enamored of misusing the tariff power to coerce concessions that he will find some other way to do it, or the majority may hand him the power to do it.
Looking towards the upcoming midterms, how impactful do you think that will be on this White House?
Well, in 2018, President Trump's party, the Republican Party, lost the majority in the House, in no small part because things he'd done in his first 2 years as president alarmed many Americans. It is my hope that we'll have free and fair elections and that the result will be my party will take the majority in either or both houses of Congress and then act as more of a check on executive overreach. Look, this is a long tradition in American politics. When either party overreaches in the next midterm elections, we lose control of 1 or 2 houses of Congress. That's happened to Democratic and Republican presidents. But this is a moment where I think we need to be particularly attentive to the need for balance and for moderation.
the late Senator John McCain, who,
Yes.
before we came on camera, you credited for dragging you to your first Halifax International
He told me I had to come. He asked me. He pushed me, and I'm so glad I did. Coming to Halifax with John McCain was truly memorable. And I got to stay up late with him and hear lots of stories, and I got to sit in the room and listen to how he interacted with our partners and allies. And at that time, he was chairman of the Armed Services Committee. So he commanded a particularly high level of respect, both for his service and sacrifice and for the role that he was playing in Congress at the time.
And was very clear in his communication that he believed that no matter how the United States may stray, the systems were in check in your country to keep the United States on the democratic path. Can you say that as confidently today?
No. So across a very wide range of avenues, we've seen more movement in the direction of weakening the guardrails of democracy. Our framers, roughly 250 years ago, next year, asserted that the separation of powers, for it to work, was going to require those who served in each branch to jealously guard the prerogatives of their branch. So instead of simply handing the nominations power to the president, it assumed that a majority in Congress, even if they were of the same party as the president, would push back and challenge and question and would not vote in unqualified, demonstrably unqualified members of a cabinet. They also assumed that they wouldn't confirm questionable judicial nominees. Most importantly, that we wouldn't give up our power of the purse. 800 years of pushing back against first English kings, then British monarchs, were rested in Parliament first, now in our system, Congress, wresting away the power of the purse. I'm an appropriator. We are on the verge of failing to appropriate again. We did what's called a continuing resolution this year. So all the work that we did to put together appropriations bills last year produced nothing. We have passed 3, but we have 8 more we have to do at least, and 2 more that I think we're not likely to. I'm the person responsible with Senator McConnell for our defense and intelligence appropriations. That's the majority of our spending. We've got a package ready to go if a few senators can drop their objections that would allow us to appropriate health, education, transportation, housing, defense, and reject Trump's budget cuts. One of the important things about what we could do in December when we come back after Thanksgiving is Republicans have shown themselves in our committee willing to reject Trump's budget cuts in all those areas. I think that would show a significant positive step. On the other hand, we've seen courts, parties, leaders, journalists not fully play their role in democracy, and I'm worried about the degree of public corruption, the weakening of confidence in our system, the loss of trust in each other, and the ways in which our guardrails are weakening.
Okay, but how do you turn that around? Because, the United States, yes, is a democracy in and of itself, but other countries, other democracies look to it as well as an example,
yes,
as a bulwark. So how do you turn that around?
So first, my party needs to come up with and present to the American people a positive agenda. We can't just run on, oh, did you notice Trump did this? He tore down the East Wing without any permission. He insulted members of Congress and threatened to kill them. Running on Trump is bad is not enough. People have lost confidence in the Democratic Party that we are committed to and capable of delivering real economic opportunity, genuine security, both physical security and retirement or economic security, and that we're focused on justice, but after we've delivered opportunity and security for our people. So I'm doing a lot of talking around the country with Democratic leaders and candidates about how we need to come together around a deliverable, accessible, sensible agenda. That's part of the discipline of elections, as Canadians know as well as Americans, that if one party's out of power, you got to make your case. You've got to persuade people to hand you back the keys so that you can be a part of governing.
So what do you say then, to the people gathered here in Halifax, again, from various countries, allies of the United States? What do you tell the people here about the United States and how to move forward in this moment in time?
Don't count us out. continue to invest in your own security capabilities, independence, weave more closely together the networks and systems that sustain democracy, and we'll be back.
Senator Chris Coons, thank you very much.
Thank you. Great to be with you, Michael.
And we'll have more from the Halifax International Security Forum in the days and the weeks to come. But for now, let's turn to Sudan, a country that has been caught in a brutal civil war since 2023. Two factions, the Sudanese army and a militia group known as the Rapid Support Force, or RSF, fighting for territory and in the process displacing millions of people, killing tens of thousands of civilians, and according to the Raoul Wallenberg Centre for Human Rights, committing genocide.
Every day, children are dying, women are being raped, the most vulnerable of the vulnerable are being assaulted and murdered. And so we have to shatter the conspiracies of silence, break down the walls of indifference, and act.
Well, Mutasim Ali is a legal advisor with the Wallenberg Centre. He joins us right now. Mutasim, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So you were on the Hill today, and I appreciate the details around what you are talking about. It's at the end of the day quite brutal because you believe there is a genocide taking place in Sudan. Human Rights Watch suspects it is. The UN investigated. They apparently came close to declaring a genocide but fell short of doing that. But what actions have you tracked that lead you to this conclusion?
First, we're speaking about a situation that is the largest humanitarian crisis in the world today. It's the largest child crisis, the largest displacement crisis. And as the Raoul Wallenberg Centre, since the onset of the conflict in April 2023, we started documenting the atrocities. We spearheaded a letter signed by over 100 international experts and jurists. At the time, the idea was to alert the international community that there was an imminent threat and risk of genocide. And the minute the international community is aware of that risk, there is like a legal duty to intervene to prevent genocide. The whole idea of the Genocide Convention is to prevent genocide from happening, and so that's the reason why we spearheaded that letter. A few months later, we documented that the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, a militia that is backed by external actors, including the United Arab Emirates, targeted the Masalid ethnic group. This is one of the largest ethnic groups in West Darfur, in the city of Al Junaina. They killed almost everybody. They went house to house. And the perpetrators declared their intention that we're here to wipe them out, referring to the Masalid.
And they were indiscriminate because based on what you said in the news conference, it was the murder and the rape of children as well involved in what was happening.
Absolutely. So they targeted first men, community leaders, and even women and children were not spared. People were targeted in their homes and in their way leaving the city, basically en route to Chad. And so that is one of the reasons why we concluded that, based on clear and convincing evidence, that the Rapid Support Forces has engaged in genocide against the Masalid in West Darfur.
So targeting an ethnic group, and yet regardless of what you've already tracked, as horrific as it is, you said today that the worst may still be ahead. What do you mean by that?
So since the massacre and the genocide in Al Junaina, the militia kept moving on to a city after city. In April 2025, they attacked one of the largest internally displaced persons camp in North Darfur called Zamzam Internally Displaced Person Camp. Most of the people lived there were displaced from the atrocities 2 decades ago. They've been living in that camp for about 20 years. And yet the militia went on and targeted and killed hundreds. At least this is like even way under count, hundreds, like at least 400 people, according to the estimate, this is way under count, were killed from the camp. And then they moved on to Al-Fashir, the city that they just captured about less than a month ago. They imposed a siege for 18 months, preventing any food from entering the city, any medical assistance. And on top of that, they continued to shell civilians in their homes, in shelters, hospitals. And so everything was planned and well organized. They employed same tactics that they use in other places in West Darfur, in Al Junaina, in Zamzam, and Al Fashir now, and then they will move on and on. And that is part of the reason why we think and we believe that Al Fashir is not the end. Unless we stop this militia from continuing these atrocities, we will continue to watch these atrocities time and again.
So now you're in Ottawa. You yourself are based in Washington, D.C., but you have come here to Ottawa with some prominent Canadian politicians. What do you want this country to do?
We believe that Canada can play a leadership role in ending these atrocities. One is by cutting off the perpetrators from the funding sources that allow them to continue the atrocities. And here let me be clear. The RSF is one main actor that is committing genocidal atrocities, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. But we also know that the other party, the Sudanese Armed Forces, is also involved in atrocities, crimes against humanity, and war crimes, as we documented in our recent report of War in Children. And the reason why these atrocities continue is because of the flow of arms and money to the warring parties. And therefore, they have to be cut off from the funding sources. Number two, perpetrators must be held accountable. We haven't seen any of those who commit atrocities with pride and broadcasted all over the social media, right? None of them has been held accountable. And I think it is crucial to hold the perpetrators accountable through either international mechanisms or regional mechanisms or even domestic prosecutions.
And we're quickly running out of time, but you also clearly want Immigration Canada to move on this to what? Reunite Sudanese families with family members here in Canada?
Absolutely. This is, I think, the most tangible action that the Canadian government can do to basically, to limit, to cut off the waiting period for the Sudanese who have families still in Sudan. I think that's really crucial, but also to increase the cap, allow more Sudanese to be reunited with their families in an expedited manner.
Well, Mutasim, as I said, you traveled here to take part in the news conference. Thank you for speaking with us today. We'll continue to follow the story.
Thanks a lot for the interest. Appreciate it.
And that is our program for this Tuesday. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. Primetime Politics is back tomorrow evening. Until then, take care.